Hello folks. So today I want to address a question which is being asked to me a lot and consistently, which is whether they should prepare for GMAT or prepare for CAT. Yes, both of them gives you entry to good MBA colleges, but the scope, how the exams are framed, the kind of colleges that accept the score is different. And I have written both of these exams within a span of 6 months, and I've done pretty good in both of them. So I think I can compare them academically, and my focus is to give you an overview of how the pattern is, what kind of sections are there, what kind of colleges that accept it, and whether you can do them together or not. So let's start with the exam pattern and structure. In that, we need to understand that GMAT is a question adaptive exam. By question adaptive, what it means is the question bank is much higher than the number of questions you are being tested on, and the next question depends on your answer of the previous question. In CAT, everyone who attempts is get the same questions which are pretty static. That is the first important thing that we need to understand in terms of structure, because what this does is in CAT you can have a selective approach. Like if I take CAT 2023 for example, even if you get 40% correct, you are comfortably above 99 percentile, which is a very good score to get you even into IIMs. The next point of comparison in terms of structure is GMAT encourages you to attempt all the questions. In CAT, you can be very selective. Like I explained, that 99 percentile was at 40% of the questions correct. So that is another point of differentiator between the two exams. Coming to the final point that I wanted to discuss, which is I think often overlooked, it's very important to understand that GMAT has relative weightage to a question. Like if you get an easy question incorrect, you are penalized much more as compared to getting a difficult question incorrect. And on the contrary side, if you get a difficult question correct, it really appreciates your score a lot. But when it comes to CAT, regardless of the fact whether the question is easy, medium or difficult, you will get +3 for it being correct and -1 for it being incorrect. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is after the GMAT shifting to focus addition, the timing and pattern of how the sections are asked is pretty much similar. Like GMAT gives you 2 hours 15 minutes to finish the entire exam, CAT gives you 120 minutes. GMAT gives you an optional break of 10 minutes, CAT does not have that feature of optional break. CAT does not give you freedom of selecting which section you want to do first, but GMAT does give you that freedom. And timing per section is 45 minutes in GMAT and 40 minutes in CAT. The name of the sections are also pretty similar. The sections are verbal, data insights in GMAT or DILR in CAT, and quant in both. Now let's start with the verbal section. After shifting to focus addition and removal of this topic of sentence correction from the verbal section, both CAT and GMAT are pretty much testing the same skill, which is your comprehension skill, which is whether you can read something, absorb it and interpret it the right way without including your judgments. The difference is GMAT asks you that in two categories of questions. First is reading comprehension, second is critical reasoning. What CAT does is ask you 3/4 of the questions as reading comprehension, but the questions in which they are asked, they are pretty much critical reasoning and argument based questions. Yes, CAT has some additional verbal ability questions, but again, the core competency that both of these sections are trying to test is pretty much the same. Now coming to the quant section, this is where there is a bit of the difference. The difference is in terms of how extensive the syllabus is. GMAT focuses a lot on your fundamental understanding of two topics, which is arithmetic and algebra. That's how they categorize it. They put all the topics inside arithmetic or algebra. Like the topics are set theory, PNC probability, then you have topics of arithmetic which are ratio and percentage, time, speed, distance, time and work, mixtures and averages, and then in algebra they test you on inequality, understanding absolute value, what is number system. CAT goes into a lot of depth when it comes to algebra in particular, because CAT also has logarithm, higher order equations, a lot more depth of functions in its syllabus. And one more thing, CAT has geometry, GMAT does not have geometry. So this diagram perfectly represents the difference between the quant of GMAT and CAT. If you are preparing for GMAT quant, you're covering more than 50% of CAT quant. because both the exams are slightly arithmetic heavy. Moving to the next section, which is called data insights in GMAT and data interpretation and logical reasoning in CAT. So the first point of difference is that a lot of questions in data insights in GMAT are called data sufficiency questions. Out of those data sufficiency questions, 90% of the questions are just quantitative questions asked in a different manner. The difference is that you get two additional piece of information and you have to see if you can answer the problem statement using either of the statement or both of the statement. In comparison, what CAT does, it gives you a set of 5 questions of puzzles. It's a complete puzzle. It can be a games and tournament puzzle, it can be a selection puzzle, it can be an arrangement puzzle. In arrangement, they can ask you to match a lot of variables. So that's where they differ. The second category of questions is how they ask you questions on tables and graphs. What GMAT focuses on is whether you can do basic observation and inferences of the table and the graph that are being showed in the exam. It just wants to test whether you can see if there's a correlation, whether you can see if median is greater than mode or median is greater than average, I beg your pardon. And another thing that it tests is whether you are able to infer the data correct or not. What CAT does, it becomes much more calculative. It is much more calculative and figuring out a lot of things in CAT, in the data and table section. There are two extra kind of questions in data insight. The one is two-part analysis and other is multi-source reasoning. Multi-source reasoning is just like case study. So that's the basic difference between the GMAT DI and CAT DILR. So that's everything about you need to know between the sections and how the kind of questions are asked. Now let's get into the kind of core competencies both these exams are trying to test. Because you're supposed to get into really good and reputed management colleges and then you will become future managers, both these exams focus a lot on your decision making ability, the kind of mindset you carry, and whether you can be consistent and disciplined or not. So these are the things which are being tested by both CAT and GMAT, and it's pretty much common. The way they are asking the question might differ, but the skill that they are trying to test is pretty much the same. Now if I come to relative effort required to prepare for GMAT versus CAT, yes, because the syllabus is much less comprehensive as compared to CAT, GMAT can realistically be done in even 3 months and you can get a very good score. CAT requires 8 to 9 months minimum effort and it can reach up to a year as well. And another difference is GMAT allows you to have multiple attempts within the year. You can just need to have a 2 weeks, slightly more than 2 weeks of cool off period, and after that you can attempt it another time. With CAT it will only happen once a year in November. Now moving on to the next thing which I want to talk about is the college comparison, basically what kind of colleges accept what score. So let's start with freshers, those who are just graduating. What are the opportunities when it comes to GMAT, or what are the opportunities when it comes to CAT? So let's start with CAT. In India, all the government colleges and private colleges, majorly 90% of them accept CAT score, and if you're a fresher they really take admission for you in their 2-year program. GMAT you can consider if you are planning to do your MBA abroad and you would want a deferred admission. So universities like Harvard or Stanford has this option where you submit your GMAT score and application, they give you a admission 2 years later once you have relevant work experience. It can be 2, it can be more than 2, depending on universities to universities. So that's the point of differentiation for freshers. When it comes to people with work experience, people with less than 5 years of work experience who want to do the 2-year flagship program of IIM still need to write CAT. But if you have more than 5 years of experience, you can go for their 1-year PGPX program, which a lot of IIMs offer now. Apart from that, once you have more than 2 years of experience, you can get into ISB, you can get into XLRI, and there are certain colleges which accept both score, as you can see in the slide. Now, the last thing that I want to address is another thing that is asked to me a lot is whether you can prepare both CAT and GMAT together. And the answer to that, particularly with this new focus edition, is yes. You definitely can prepare for both GMAT and CAT together. Just see, GMAT has components which are asked in CAT. Verbal is pretty much similar according to me. I think they are at par. Whether you're preparing for CAT or GMAT, you have to prepare the same way. coming to quant, as I said, once you are preparing for GMAT, you are pretty much done with 55 to 60% of the syllabus and level of depth you need for CAT. And yes, the third section is slightly different, but if you are asking me whether we can do it simultaneously or not, yes, there is a lot of merit in doing it simultaneously, because preparing for GMAT like gets you halfway for CAT, and then you just need to put the rest half of the effort. So yes, you can prepare for it simultaneously. So that's everything that I wanted to talk about, which I feel is relevant to be discussed when it comes to GMAT and CAT. And I hope this video gave you a lot of clarity